one of the AFL media's biggest names just did their most revealing interview to date. The answers they gave might have exposed them as who they really are and made it more clear their on-air personality is more of an act. The Herald Sun's newest chief football writer also revealed the official top 50 players in the competition, and as always, there were some questionable placements, and the notorious West Australian, known for their outlandish front pages, might have turned the corner, and this time for the better. But let's start with the interview that caught people's attention. Kane Cornes spoke to The Age's Andrew Wu about his life in the spotlight compared to his life at home. Fair to say they are complete opposites. We all know Cornes' big run-ins with Luke Beveridge and of late North Melbourne. The two clubs have even banned him from their rooms, and during his time on air at Channel 9 and now 7 and even radio with SEN, Cornes has been confrontational, and it's been a big part of his media career. But interestingly, it's not a big part of his real world life. I rarely would ever get into confrontation in real life, certainly not in my personal life. If it's not work related, there's no confrontation in my life. I've got a very balanced home life, very stable, very calm. I've been with my wife since I was 15, we've hardly ever had an argument. There's zero confrontation in my personal life, which is nice. When asked if he is a paradox in human form, Cornes said, "A little bit. Maybe it is, it's the way it is and the way it's always been." Now Cornes has always made it clear he believes all of his opinions and that they are not made up for television, but perhaps his on-air personality is a touch contrived. The Age says Cornes is a self-described introvert, he's sensitive, overly some of his critics say, and does not actively seek attention. Yet in the AFL media world, no one seeks more eyeballs than the volcano. It is a paradox when looking at his regular home life. But to form an on-air personality, you would think Cornes would have had to take inspiration from somewhere. No one in the AFL media has really been like him before, but luckily for us, Cornes opened up about where he began to form his on-air presence. A major consumer of US sports media, he's a big fan of media personalities Bill Simmons, Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless and Colin Cowherd, who have all made millions from their combative commentary. He has based his style on them. Getting into media, what do the best, highest paid, most famous people do? They're all opinionists. They all have strong opinions. There's no one really over there that does the similar role to me without an opinion. Cornes does deserve credit here. He was able to look at the US market and see who were the biggest sport media personalities and then dissect what the best did. It all goes back to those big opinions and confrontation which Cornes has mastered here in Australia. He is the AFL's Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless or Bill Simmons, and has been ahead of his time in our market. Fakeish perhaps, but in a way genius and literally ahead of the game. Cornes loves on-air confrontation. When Bulldogs great Luke Darcy accused him of being more mean-spirited and nasty to people than anyone in the history of our industry, Cornes said his immediate thought was how compelling this must have been for listeners. Cornes has figured out what the current day viewers and listeners want, and he is giving it to them in spades. But he still has a conscience and has been reined in of late. The Sheezy Ball incident, in which Cornes analysed Harry Sheezel's game and his lack of damage, using his last name to describe what he thought were cheap disposals, probably was too far. It's said in The Age, 2 months on, Cornes, not known for admitting error, says he maybe went too far for his excessive use of the term Sheezy Ball, Sheezy Street and Sheezy. I just want to put on record how highly I do rate him, and the basis behind it was he wasn't being used effectively, Cornes said. Did I say Sheezy Ball too many times? Maybe. There's clearly theatre involved in TV and entertainment. It is funny that Cornes is so present in the media and analysis world, despite not being on board with it in his early playing days. As a player, Cornes did not take criticism well, a point he admits. When former Crows captain Chris McDermott wrote in 2009 that Cornes was no longer in Port's best 22, he refused to speak to McDermott for 2 years. Times have certainly changed for Cornes, who is mastering the AFL media game and doing it in a US style revolution. But moving on, one of the big responsibilities of being chief football writer of the Herald Sun is the top 50 players. Normally there is one at the start of the season and the end of the season, but with Jay Clark replacing Mark Robinson, he has decided to drop his mid-season. Fair to say it is bulldog crazy. According to Clark, 3 of the top 4 players right now are dogs. The Bont settles at number 1, with Dacos sitting right behind him at 2nd, but it's Ed Richards at 3 and Sam Darcy at 4 that might raise eyebrows. Richards is having a fantastic year, but I still think many would have Zach Butters, who sits at 8, Jeremy Cameron 7, Heaney 16, and even Neil at 18 ahead of him. Now Darcy at 4 does seem very high, even though he has shown his immense talent, but the rest of it looks pretty solid. Geelong's dynamic duo in Max Holmes and Bailey Smith sit 5th and 6th, which is the highest midfield pairing in back-to-back spots, and Max Gawn is listed as the number 1 ruck at position 13, a couple spots ahead of North Melbourne's Tristan Cherry. The notable fall-offs mainly come from Carlton, with only Tom De Koning getting a spot in the 50. Superstars Patrick Cripps, Charlie Curnow and fullback Jacob Wiedering are not included. The Bulldogs, GWS Collingwood and Brisbane are all equal with 5 members in the 50 and 3 clubs have 0. They include Richmond and West Coast, which probably come at no surprise, but the 3rd club in Hawthorn will. No John Newcombe is stiff, and Dylan Moore, Jack Gunston and Josh Battle are others who would have been close in this season's form. But perhaps that goes to show how even a spread of contributors Hawthorn has. But for now, the Bont is still the top dog, but a few players are right behind him. And to finish off on a positive, let's go to Western Australia. In the past few weeks, West Coast have lost another 2 players. The first was all-time great intercept defender Jeremy McGovern and consistent midfielder and forward Dom Sheed. It's fitting that both were in that play that won them the grand final in 2018. McGovern started it with the intercept mark, and Sheed finished it off with one of the best set shots in AFL history. Both are West Coast immortals. Now the West Australian, the biggest paper in WA, has been known to be a touch negative, Adam Simpson the target at the end of his tenure, and then Harley Reid, who has to have the record for most front pages. But in honour of Sheed specifically, this front page was fitting. It shows Sheed about to kick the ball from the boundary, and it has himself in a tint of golden brown. Clearly they are alluding to a statue outside of Optus Oval, and it does seem fitting. It's perhaps the greatest kick in West Coast history, and a statue would fit nicely outside of their home stadium.